How's it going, everybody? My name is Salty and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be going over the 10 most underrated class setups here in Black Ops Cold War. All right, so these class setups are not going to be in any particular order. I'm just kind of going through my list here as I put them together. There are some weapons on this list that you may think is a bad weapon, other people may think it's a meta, but this is my personal opinion, so keep that in mind. Your list could be completely different, but I feel like almost every weapon in this game is viable to somebody. I think all of them are definitely usable. You may dislike some more than others, but at the end of the day, the balance here in Cold War is very good. But these are going to be my top 10 underrated setups. So if you guys have any differing opinions, make sure you go down in the comments and let me know. Let's get into it. All right, so let's get started here with the first weapon that I have, and that's going to be the Type 63. The Type 63 kind of gets overlooked because of the DMR. The DMR is a very similar tactical rifle, has low recoil, faster fire rate. But let me tell you, this one's actually pretty easy to use. Because of the slower fire rate, the recoil pattern is extremely easy to control, especially with these attachments. So it can still be a two-shot kill. The statistics are extremely similar to the DMR. So technically the DMR does become a better weapon statistically, but when it comes down to like accuracy and things like that, I feel like the Type 63 thrives in those areas. Let's get into the class setup here. For the optic, basically for all of my optic choices, it's going to be a preference. If you guys have one that you prefer more, make sure you're going with that. But let's get into it. For my optic, I have the Vigitech 2x. Not much to talk about here. Down to the muzzle, I have the Spetsnaz compensator. This is going to be for vertical recoil control. Now, the vertical recoil control is necessary on the Type 63. I feel like if you're not running this, it does like to bounce a bit as you start to spam the trigger. So between this and the underbarrel that I am running, it is extremely easy to use. And it's a slower paced weapon. You got to keep that in mind. It is a semi-auto, so you're not going to be exactly sprinting into their spawns, getting into point blank type gunfights. Getting down to the barrel, I have the 18.3 inch strike team where it adds 9% damage and 11% fire rate. So if we get into these statistics here, our damage is up to 74. Like I said, it has that potential for a two-shot if you hit a headshot there. And that's all the way up to 38 meters. That's extremely good. And then it's a three-shot basically after that. I've never really gotten a four-shot kill unless I'm like wall banging with a Type 63. Then our fire rate's at 400 rounds per minute, which is pretty, it's definitely slower than the DMR, but I believe it's only by 50 or 75 rounds per minute. It's not all too crazy there. The statistics overall on the DMR are extremely good. So let's get on to our next attachment for the body, where I have the KGB target designator. This is my preferred body option here. I know some people like to go with laser sights or the mounted flashlight. One thing I don't recommend is going to be the 5mm laser, Tiger Team Spotlight, or Ember Sighting Point. There's just too much to sacrifice here, and there's definitely other things that can make up for it, but let's be honest, you don't need to sacrifice any extra aim down sight speed for the Ember Sighting Point, and that sprint to fire speed loss isn't necessary with the Tiger Team when you have an attachment like the mounted in the KGB target designator. So let's get on to our next attachment here, for the underbarrel, the Spetsnaz grip. Like I said, compare this up with that muzzle, and you have virtually no recoil. It basically recenters by itself. 10% vertical and 40% horizontal recoil control. Down to the magazine, 30 round mag. You can definitely change this out if you're playing on a map like Nuketown or Miami Strike. You need something to reload quickly, but it's a preference attachment just like the optic there. Down to the handle, Grew Elastic Wrap. Most amount of aim down sight speed. We have 90% added to our flinch resistance and ability to drop shot. Then finishing it off with the KGB pad, 30% sprint to fire speed, along with 40% also added to the aim walking movement speed. I like to run this because of the situation where I possibly get into a close range engagement. I'm going to need the sprint to fire speed, but if you are a much slower player where you're only planning on taking medium and long range gunfights, you can definitely go with the Raider here. It's going to add some shoot moving speed and even more aim walking movement speed. So your stray speeds are kind of going to be a little crazy there. Very, very good. Yeah, that's the only two attachments that I would really change out. Let's slide over to the next weapon. For my next weapon, I'm going with the Bullfrog. The Bullfrog has always been a weapon that has kind of fallen outside the meta here in Cold War, but it's an extremely easy weapon to use. That's why I think it's underrated. It definitely is lower on the damage side of things, lower on the time to kill side of things, but where it thrives is the ease of use. Very little recoil. When you add the right attachments, it has great damage. It's just never fallen in the meta just because the statistics just don't lie in the right places. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it's a lot of people's favorite weapon in this game. So let's get into my attachments here. Starting the muzzle, I have the Grew Suppressor. This is one that's just a preference. 7% vertical recoil control is really all I feel it needs. But if you want, you can go with the Spetsnaz compensator, normal sound suppressor if you so feel like you could control that recoil. This is one that's going to be a preference. Getting down to the barrel, I have the 7.4 inch Task Force. We have 3% damage, 50% effective damage range, and 75% bullet velocity. So the damage really isn't all too much. 3% is just basically nothing added there. So it brings it up to 35 damage. Our effective damage range is actually extremely good at 23 meters, and our bullet velocity is now up to 437.5. This is just one of those attachments I feel like the Bullfrog needs. It just feels much better to me while I'm running the Task Force barrel. Getting down to the underbarrel, I have the normal foregrip. We took care of that vertical there with the GRU suppressor, so I really don't feel like the Spetsnaz is necessary as you're sacrificing a lot of shoot moving speed there at 30%. In my opinion, all we had left to cover was going to be that horizontal, so the foregrip gives us 15% here. The VDV speed grip is another good option. It gives us 15% and 3% to our shoot moving speed or sprint moving speed, but you are sacrificing some other movement speeds in return. Getting down to the magazine, I have the Vandal speed loader. So this is one you don't necessarily have to run this. If you're playing on a bigger map, you do not need the Vandal speed loader. This is just my personal preference. So if you were not to run a magazine, you could go with a handle here where you should use the GRU elastic wrap. Now we're going to jump down to the stock where I have the KGB skeletal. Now 30% added to the sprint to fire speed and 10% also added to the aim walking movement speed. If you want a little more hip fire accuracy here, you can go with the no stock, but personally I like to have that extra stray speeds. So we're going to jump on over to our next weapon. For the next weapon, I have the FAR 83. This is one of those weapons I rarely see used in game for some reason. I'm not sure if people just don't like the iron sights, they don't like the recoil pattern, but to me, this is a very overlooked weapon. It is very good for aggressive players. It's not quite as good as the FFAR, but it definitely has easier recoil to control. And you can still play extremely aggressive with it. In my opinion, it's in the same kind of category as that Bullfrog. It just kind of always falls outside of the meta. Let's get into my class setup here. Starting just like the Bullfrog, I'm going with the GRU suppressor for 6% vertical recoil control. You can swap this out if you feel like there's too much vertical kick there for something like the Spetsnaz compensator. But personally, I think I really have no problems running this. I feel like the recoil is very easy to control on the FAR 83. Getting down to the barrel, I have the 19.5-inch Liberator for 100% added to our bullet velocity. I know some people like to run the ultralight barrel here. I'm also a fan of that, so if you were really going for a movement build, just throw that on. But I feel like to give it that ability to take some longer range engagements, you do need that Liberator barrel because it's basically where it's lacking. It has a great effective damage range at 43.18 meters, and this barrel brings our bullet velocity up to 1,048.65 meters per second. That's pretty insane. Basically hit scans, you can take some pretty crazy gunfights. If you were going with the ultralight, as you guys can see, our bullet velocity is brought all the way down to 619.65 meters per second, which is going to make it a little more difficult to hit those shots at longer ranges. You're going to have to lead them a bit. All right, we're going to skip right over the body and the underbarrel where we're going with the magazine, where I have the Spetsnaz 50 round preference attachment. Use whatever you want. Where they handle the GRU elastic wrap, like always, basically most amount of aim down sight speed. We also have flinch resistance added and the ability to drop shot. And then finishing this build off with the KGB skeletal stock, 30% added to our sprint to fire speed, along with 40% also to the aim walking movement speed. We're going to get over to an LMG here. So the RPD, in my opinion, is an LMG that was always overlooked by the Stoner 63. The Stoner 63 feels like it hits like a truck, but they did nerf it, and the recoil is a bit more spotty now. It makes it a little harder to actually take some longer range engagements. And that's when I gave the RPD a shot. This thing is basically just as good. The statistics are extremely similar, but it has less recoil. So what we're going to do now is jump through this one, 8 attachments, because we're going... It's an LMG. You're going to need to play a bit slower with an LMG. You have a slower aim down sight speed, slower movement speed with the weapon as a whole, slower sprint to fire speed. So that's why I like to run 8 attachments on things like LMGs and tactical rifles. So we're getting started here. I've already talked about the optics here. Run whatever you're comfortable with, but I'm going with the Vision Tech 2 times. For the muzzle, I have the Spetsnaz compensator. We got 15% added to our vertical recoil control here. Now that's pretty simple. You want very limited recoil if you're going to be taking longer range engagements. Down to the barrel, the 20.3-inch Task Force. Unlike any other weapon category in the game, the LMGs do not have a negative to your recoil. The only thing it takes away is ammo capacity. So what the Task Force barrel does here is it gives us 5% added damage, 100% effective damage range, and 44% added also to the bullet velocity. So now our damage is up to 44. Our effective damage range is at a great 50.8 meters, and our bullet velocity is at 982.91 meters per second. Those are well-rounded statistics, especially for an LMG. So we're going down to the body. I've already discussed my body attachment, KGB target designator here. It just makes it easier to see your targets while aiming down the sights. This is definitely by far my favorite body attachment. Getting down to the underbarrel, the Spetsnaz grip. Much like the muzzle, you need to control some recoil to take some longer range engagement. We got 8% vertical and 30% added to the horizontal recoil control. For the magazine, I have the 75 round mag. You can also go with the fast mag here, but keep in mind, they did nerf this weapon at one point and it took away some ammo for some reason. I think that's the only thing it nerfed, and brought it down to like 50 bullets or something like that. So yeah, it's a little weird. It doesn't feel like an LMG when you're only running like 50 bullets in the magazine. You can also go with the 75 round speed mag, but just keep in mind, you're going to be losing some aim down sight speed there. For the handle, GRU elastic wrap. I'm sure you know, LMGs in this game have an extremely slow aim down sight speed. So you're going to need this to just boost it up. 30% added to the aim down sight speed, 90% flinch resistance and ability to drop shot. Keep in mind, the aim down sight speed still is not extremely fast, even with that 30% added. Finishing off the build, I have the KGB skeletal stock, 30% added to our sprint to fire speed, along with 40% also to the aim walking movement speed. Let's jump over to the next weapon. Moving over to our next assault rifle on the list, we have the Groza. And recently I discovered that a lot of people are using this in league play. And I'm sure they figured it out the same way I did. This thing's actually really, really good. And I'm surprised it doesn't jump into a meta spot. I mean, it makes sense. The statistics don't line up. The FFAR is still better. I still think the Vargo is better than it, but I'm surprised I don't see it more on the map. It is a very aggressive assault rifle. So if you're like an SMG player, a very aggressive player, this is going to fit you extremely well. Very low recoil, great range statistics if you want to take the gunfights. With the fast fire rate, you get to get up close and personal with people with an absurd sprint to fire speed. So let's jump into it here. Starting for the barrel, I go with the GRU composite. The reason we're going with this is there's not going to be any negatives running it. We have 25% effective damage range and 25% bullet velocity. Where, as you can see here with the reinforced, we are sacrificing some movement speeds. And as an aggressive weapon, that's not really ideal. So what this does to our statistics is it's going to bring our effective damage range up to 66.67 meters. Now, let's be honest, we're not taking any 66 meter engagements with the Groza. It's just not happening. It's just not one of those weapons. It's a fast firing weapon. You really shouldn't be taking those engagements. But the bullet velocity brings it up to 825 meters per second, meaning we can take some pretty far medium range gunfights. Somewhere along the lines of 40 meters is really where I like to keep it comfortable, and you will win that gunfight with ease as long as you're hitting your shots, of course. But what the attachment that's going to help with you hitting those shots are going to be the Spetsnaz grip. Now, the Spetsnaz grip is one of the attachments that received a buff here for the Groza, where it gives you 15% vertical recoil control along with 25% to the horizontal. It's the only attachment you need for recoil, and I'm telling you, thing's an absolute laser beam. Getting down to the magazine, preference attachment again, I like to use the 50 round drum, but feel free to use whatever you want here. For the handle, the GRU elastic wrap again, you're going to want the most amount of aim down sight speed. We also have 90% to the flinch resistance and ability to drop shot, and then finishing off the build with the KGB pad. Now, this is another attachment that received a buff here for the Groza, 50% added to our sprint to fire speed. That's the most in the game. And then 40% also added to the aim walking movement speed. Again, I'm surprised more people aren't running around on a map like Nuketown with this weapon. It absolutely fries. Definitely one that you need to go in game and give a try. Let's slide over to our next SMG. All right, so up next, I'm going with the Milano 821 slash Uzi slash whatever the heck you guys, I've heard a lot of names for this weapon. The Milano is one of my favorites to use in the game, even though it just statistically isn't all that great. It has a pretty slow time to kill, but it's one of those weapons that is extremely rewarding to get kills with. It feels absolutely awesome. So let's jump into my class setup here, starting with the infantry compensator for 12% vertical recoil control. Pretty simple. I feel like I don't need to talk about that all too much, but the biggest reason we need that is going to be this 10.6-inch task force. 5% added to our damage, but more importantly, 50% added to our effective damage range and bullet velocity. So if we go over to the statistics here, we're at a great 44 damage, which means you can get a 3-shot kill, get headshot. Then we also have the effective damage range up to 22.86 meters, pretty dang good there. Then our bullet velocity is up to 393.75 meters per second. Still a little bit of the low side, but after using all the barrels, this is by far my favorite. Getting down to the underbarrel, I think this is necessary because that task force barrel, one of the negatives to running it is going to be recoil control. So I feel like this paired up with the compensator, the field agent grip is just a great mix. It has a very easy recoil pattern to control, 7% vertical and 16% horizontal recoil control. Getting down to the magazine, I have the 55 round drum. Again, preference, use whatever you're comfortable with here. And finishing off the build with the airborne elastic wrap for the most amount of aim down sight speed on the weapon, along with 90% flinch resistance and ability to drop shot. All right, up next for me is going to be the Carve Point 2. A lot of people in my comment section preach the Carve is the best tactical rifle in the game. I'm going to be honest, I was pretty harsh on it. I still don't think it's the best tactical rifle. I think the DMR and the M16 still have a beat, but that's just my personal preference. You can love the Carve all you want. I think it's a great weapon, and that's exactly why it's on the underrated weapon list. After trying out some class setups, moving around some attachments, the thing's an absolute blast to use. So let's get started here. I do not like the iron sights here on the Carve. I know some people do, but personally, not really a big fan. So I like to use the Vision Tech 2 times here, but preference. If you guys want to run the iron sights, you can definitely throw on a handle here or something like that, really whatever you want. Or you know, switch it out for another scope. Getting down to the muzzle, the Carve is a weapon that has very, very, very little recoil, especially being a burst rifle. So I'm going with the muzzle brake here for 10% vertical recoil control. This just helps us recenter our shots after the burst is fired. Getting down to the barrel, we're going with the 20.8-inch strike team. After dumbing down the statistics for it, this weapon had a great effective damage range and bullet velocity, so I felt like some added fire rate was really the only thing that needed to be added. We also are gaining 5% damage here. The titanium, in my opinion, just isn't really all that great. That extra damage is really kind of a big asset to me. So let's get going with these statistics. 41 damage. It's a pretty easy 1-burst kill, seeing as it's a 4-round burst weapon. It's just one of those things that I feel like it's one of those attachments I've played around with enough that 41 damage really does feel like it's actually helping me. So the effective damage range does get brought down by the strike team barrel, but 34.29 meters is still very, very respectable here for the carve. Just keep in mind, it's not going to be a 1-burst kill past those points. For the fire rate, it's brought up to 612 rounds per minute. Extremely good there for a burst or tactical rifle. And then the bullet velocity is at a pretty good 605 meters per second. So let's get on to our next attachment here, where I skip right over the body. We're going to the underbarrel. This one's different, much different than I'm normally used to using. The infiltrator grip. This gives us movement speeds. We have 5% to our movement, shoot moving, and aim walking movement speed. Now you match this up with the stock. We'll get to that in a second. So we're skipping over the magazine and handle, and that's where we have our stock, where we're going with the Raider pad. So we're getting sprint to fire speed, but also 40% added to the aim walking movement speed. So that 40% tacks on another 5% with the infiltrator grip. It just helps our overall movement speeds much more. So when you take a look at the infiltrator grip, 5% there to our aim walking. Another good one is going to be the SAS combat, but with this being a fast fire rate tactical rifle, I tend to play a bit more aggressive with it, so I feel like that sprint to fire speed is necessary. All right, so the last assault rifle on my list here is going to be the QBZ-83, and it's one class setup in mind that tends to be a little underrated. Outside of this class setup, I think the QBZ is one of the more bad assault rifle choices in the game, but once I discovered this one, I really became a fan of the QBZ. This is one that I actually haven't shared on the channel before, so make sure you're paying attention to this one. Let's get started here for the muzzle. Going with the infantry compensator for 12% vertical recoil control. Normally you wouldn't even need this on the QBZ. It has very low recoil, but we are going to go with the task force barrel here. We're gaining 6% damage and then 50% to our effective damage range and bullet velocity. Like I said, it's one of those attachments that once I tried, I don't know what it is, because it's not a huge, significant damage increase. It's up to 34 damage, which is definitely a little better, but our effective damage range is at 68.58 meters and our bullet velocity is at 1006.5 meters per second. So we're keeping all of our movement speeds on top of this, where if you're going with a barrel such as the Ranger or the Reinforced, you can see 4% loss to our sprint moving and 20% to the aim walking, and then 20% to the aim walking if we're running the Ranger. So those are the two most used barrel on this weapon. The task force, when you take a look at it, you can see there's no loss to those movement speeds. We are losing some recoil control, but with the right attachments, pretty dang good. Okay, so we're getting down to the next attachment where we are using the normal foregrip here. So the foregrip gives us 15% horizontal recoil control. We took care of all that vertical there with the infantry compensator. So now all that was left to cover was really that horizontal. That normal foregrip matched up there with the muzzle. It was pretty easy to use. So now we're going to slide down where I have the magazine. We're going with the 40-round drum. Now, the reason we're doing this is we're not going with a handle. So this is one that I would not recommend going with anything other than the 40-round drum, jungle style mag, or the SAS mag clamp. Because like I said, no handle on this build, but we're finishing it off with that Raider stock. Just in case we get into those closer range engagements, you're going to need the sprint to fire speed. So 30% added there, along with 40% also to the aim walking movement speed. So what puts this class setup over the top, in my opinion, is being able to keep those movement speeds. You get to move around the map extremely quick with the QBZ here, making it a very aggressive option if you want to use the weapon as a whole. That's really what I feel like really brought the weapon down, was those loss to movement speeds. But definitely another one you're going to want to go into game and give me some opinions on. All right, so we're now on the second to last weapon here on the list, and we're going with the MAC-10. I feel like I never really see the MAC-10 when I'm playing the game. I see it once in a while on maps like Nuketown, but I actually uploaded this class setup. It was given to me by a subscriber a couple weeks ago, and it has become one of my most used. So once you learn how to control the recoil here on the MAC-10, it is an absolute tank on the map. So we're going to jump into it. I'm sure some of you are already familiar with it, but if you haven't given it a try, definitely do so. The reinforced heavy is where we're starting here for 18% effective damage range and 80% bullet velocity, which is kind of where the weapon was lacking. It's extremely fast firing, so they kind of want you up in the face of people. So it brings our effective damage range up to 13.49 meters, pretty good for an SMG. Our bullet velocity is now at 360 meters per second. It was definitely lacking in both of those categories. So getting down to the underbarrel, we have the SFUD speed grip. Normally I would run a muzzle and underbarrel, but someone told me just run the SFUD speed grip. It gives you plenty. 10% vertical, 10% horizontal recoil control. I'm telling you, the recoil is just fine. You're still not going to be taking medium range gunfights, but compare it to the other SMGs and how you're playing, you really don't find problems, and I really enjoy using just the speed grip here. So we're going down to the magazine preference attachment. Just use whatever you're comfortable with. Depending on the map you're playing, you can change that one out. For the handle, we are going with the airborne elastic wrap. We got the most amount of aim down sight speed. Simple as that. 90% flinch resistance and ability to drop shot. And then the Raider stock. 30% sprint to fire speed. 10% also added to the aim walking movement speed. I feel like this one's less underrated than some of the other ones, but at the same time, like I said, I feel like I never see it on the map. Unless I'm playing Nuketown, I feel like it never pops up. So let me know. Maybe this one's a little bit of a hot take. Maybe people think this one's in the meta, but in my opinion, I think it's underrated. Let's get over to our final weapon. Okay, so for our final weapon here, we have the M60. Now the M60 this is basically the same class setup I have for the RPD. And I think it's underrated for the same reasons the RPD is. It's overlooked by the stoner. I know in some of like the 12v12 games, this is a meta. People like to run thermals and smokes and stuff like that with the M60. God, you will never catch me doing that. Let me just say that. But I don't really run into it much in 6v6. It's an extremely slow-paced weapon. And that's exactly why I think we kind of run into that, why I never see it. In 12v12, there's so many more players where people can sit back and just get feeds on people. So I guess it kind of makes sense that we don't see it in 6v6. But if you're a slower paced player, this could definitely be a very good option for you. So let's get started with the Vigitech 2x, pretty common theme. Use whatever you want though. For the muzzle, the infantry compensator. This weapon does have a bit more recoil than the RPD, but when you can pair up the muzzle and underbarrel, it's very easy to control. 15% added to our vertical recoil control here. For the barrel, the 22.8-inch task force, like I said, it's very, very similar to the RPD build. You get 10% damage, 100% effective damage range, and 39% bullet velocity. It brings our statistics to 55 damage, meaning it's a 3-shot kill up to 50.8 meters. Our bullet velocity is now 1,095.54 meters per second. Now we're getting down to the body where I have the SOF target designator. I'm not going to really talk about this too much. Getting down to the underbarrel, the field agent grip, 8% vertical recoil control, and with 30% horizontal recoil control. Like I said, match that up with that muzzle. Pretty easy to control. For the magazine, I'm going with the normal fast mag here. You can also go with the 100-round mag. They both do not sacrifice aim down sight speed. For the handle, we have the airborne elastic wrap for the most amount of aim down sight speed, which is needed on LMGs. And then for the stock, I like to use the SAS Combat, which is one that is different from the RPD because I want these extra movement speeds, 10% to our shoot and 75% to our aim walking movement speed, because this one is a much slower paced LMG for everything from movement to fire rate than the RPD. So like I said, for slower paced players, this 100% could be a very good choice for you. But that's my list. Make sure you guys go down in that comment section. If anything is different, you think I missed an underrated weapon, you think I'm out of line on some of these, you think they're not underrated at all, please be civil down in the comment section. But if you guys want to give me your whole dang top 10, I will definitely be down to take a look. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed the video, if you could make sure you hit that like button for me, that'd be absolutely awesome. If you're new to the channel, make sure you also smash that subscribe button. I'll see you guys in the next video.